Welcome to Panther Planet. We believe that the human experience is universal. We explore how our interconnected world is smaller than we think, and despite differences, the human yearning for connection, understanding, beauty, and truth are found both near and far. This season, Peter, Eva, and Chris are going to show you how international traditions, cultures, and experiences impact one's identity as a local and global citizen. This is Peter.
This is Chris,
This is Ava.
and this is Panther Planet.
The Panther Planet podcast is produced by the UW-Milwaukee Global Studies Department, UW-Milwaukee Language Resource Center, and UWM students. It is funded by a U.S. Government National Resource Center grant.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. My name is Violeta Ramirez. I very much identify as first-gen American, Chicana and Latina, and I grew up being bilingual and bicultural. My family immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico City, Mexico, back in 1994. And I believe that in an unknowingly way throughout my education, I've been breaking generational patterns. So I am actually the youngest of three and the first in my immediate family to have a degree.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Can you tell me more about what generational patterns that you see yourself breaking, or like compared to past generations in your own family, like what that looks like outside of education?
Yeah, so within my family, a lot, especially with the young women, have gotten married at a very young age or, had unplanned pregnancies. So that really uh, put a pause with what they were going to do of moving forward since then. My mother was very much an advocate for me once I graduated high school to go to get a higher education because for herself, she was able to get a nursing certificate back in Mexico, but once she got pregnant, that was all done. She never got to actually move forward with nursing. Maybe did it for a couple months from my understanding when we've talked about it, but after that it was you're a stay-at-home mom, the traditional family dynamic of the husband works, you stay at home and take care of the kids. And then even so with my siblings, both my brother and my sister as well, young age, had kids, left the house. And even so with their own children, the pattern kind of continues. So for me, it was like a big deal that I was able to break out from that. And especially one of the things is that I'm outspoken. Like I actually call family members out on things, and being of a Latina background, it's very much of like the saying is calladita más bonita. So when you're quiet, you're more pretty, right? So it's kind
Yeah.
of like that phrase of you should stay quiet, let things go, and just move on. But I am very much the type that does not do that. I call people out, and I think that's helped me a lot, even so now, especially in the professional world, because I do it respectfully, but I'm not afraid to speak up if I have an idea or if I think something could be done differently or such things like that.
And I feel like many Latinos can identify with this story. Like me myself, I'm the first one in my family to also come to college. And having all these generational patterns that go through our families, that sometimes it feels like there's no way of coming out of that you have to follow through
Mm-hmm.
and that you have to stay there to make sure that your family stays afloat. That sometimes that can just bring you down and keep you without going to follow your dreams. So
Mm-hmm.
to hear that there's another side, that you can get to the other side of this and be successful and get what you want and still be there for your family at the same time is just very aspirational. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, it's very much, I think a lot of people don't realize how much when you come from a collectivistic family dynamic, everything has to essentially go through the family,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not just, oh, I want to go to college. Okay, that's great. And then you bring up the fact that you want to go, in my case, out of state. Whereas Milwaukee from Lake County region is like an hour away.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean you want to go out of state? Right? Like, what
Yeah.
about us? Like, what about the family?
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, it also rolls over to like studying abroad. So it's like, wait a minute, well, you got to go out of state, now you want to go out of the country. Like, what are you talking about, right? So
Yeah, it
Yeah.
similar
gets
dynamic.
tricky.
How is the
Hmm.
dynamic now, would you say, now that like you've graduated, like you're on your own in a different way, like with your degree and encouraging others to study abroad? Like what is the family dynamic like throughout like those years and now?
Yeah, which is funny because, well, the background story, my first study abroad experience was when I was at College of Lake County. So I went to community college first for 2 years, and I transferred to UWM. And the story there was, it was a huge deal. Mind you, my study abroad experience with Japan was only a 3-week program, right? And I applied, didn't think I would get in. I just did it because my mom was like, just go for it. And if they reject you, who cares? You can try again some other time. To my surprise, I got accepted. And I was like, what the heck? Got a full ride for it, got to go. And then my automatic thought after all that happened was like, what am I going to tell my dad? Because now it was like, oh, great, I'm gonna go, but then how do I bring this up? And then, this is a huge story, but like at the end of the day, my dad found out. He was very upset, very angry to the point where he like told me, you better drop, otherwise you're gonna see the consequences. And I just didn't do it. So the consequence at that point was like he just stopped talking to me for the rest of the semester. So then, the summer hits, and then now it's like the opposite. We gotta go. You gotta get to the airport early. What if you miss your flight? Is the group gonna be there? And then it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought you were angry at me, and then after that, like hearing from my mom of, oh yeah, when you came back, he just keeps telling his colleagues, oh yeah, my daughter went to Japan. My daughter went to Japan. And then it's like, okay, well, where was that before then, right? Like the encouragement.
Yeah.
But ever since then, at least, I got to go to China once I was at UWM through UW Platteville. That was a full ride, which was a wonderful opportunity I found out about through one of my friends that did a presentation in one of our Mandarin classes. And after that, I was like, I need to apply to that. So I got to go for a full month, and then that was in June of 2017. But shockingly, too, the way this worked out is that same year, so since and on August 2017, I left again, but this time to go to Korea for a whole year. But interestingly, even before this, like between the gap of me being in community college and completing that program until I transferred, I always had that itch of like, I need to go abroad again. Like, I need to figure this out. What kind of majors can I get into that makes me go out again? Or how can I just get out of the US, right? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of careers are there with this? And then since then, that's essentially how I ended up going to UW Milwaukee, because I was researching schools that had study abroad programs. And at the time, I was very indecisive between China and Korea, essentially because I was interested in those languages anyway. And
Mhm.
then I just liked the exchange program that UWM had with Korea. So that's why I ended up making my decision to go there instead, because that was the goal. So then at that point, the discussion was always brought up in little tidbits of like, oh, I'm going to go abroad again. Or yeah, I've been looking at this. Or I talked with financial aid. I talked to my advisor about this and this, so it's kind of like sneaking in there. So by the time it was like me saying I applied to this program, it wasn't a shock anymore. They're like, oh yeah, you've been talking about it forever, so whatever, go for it.
And also, I feel like, sorry, for most of them, it's also really scary just to let their children, who they still see as some little kid who they had to protect, go so far away from them where they have no power to protect them or be around them. It's just haunting for them. And I'm so glad that you managed to go and get the support, but I imagine it was very hard for them to understand why you wanted to go so far away from them, and making them
Mm.
understand that it wasn't about them. It was something that you had to do for your own.
Yeah, for sure. But it's funny now, like considering how everything has happened. Now my parents are more my dad. My mom has been more of an advocate for me about this, but more my dad. I think it's the whole dynamic of the protector, the provider,
Yeah.
because now it's like if I go out for leisure, he's the first like, oh, I have to drop you off at the airport. And then I have to like make sure I'm connected with them somehow with like WhatsApp or Zoom and like, oh yeah, I'm gonna message you. I'll send you pictures to show you I'm alive, So it's like things like that now, but it's not weird for them anymore that I'm wanting to travel on my own.
Can you speak a little bit more about like the dynamic between you and your mom and like what that looked like when you were growing up and just like into your, because it seems like based on what you're saying that your mom was very supportive of you doing and achieving all that you have from the get-go.
We've been very close. I think the biggest reason for that, aside, I mean, like with being such an advocate for me, is because growing up, I always constantly heard like, you need to go to school. No boyfriend. And it's funny because like you always hear that from, maybe whatever type of family you come from, like you shouldn't have a boyfriend and this and that. But with my parents, because of like the generational patterns, you can understand why they would
Right.
say that. So it was always, don't have a boyfriend. You need to focus on school. You shouldn't be distracted. You want a distraction, join clubs, go to sports, do this and that. No boys. So, and that being said, for her being such an advocate for me to continue on with school was a big deal because at least her thing was always to that we can't help you because we just don't know how. So you need to speak up. So at least I get that side from her as well. Like you shouldn't feel ashamed of asking for help because if we can't help you, then how can you help yourself?
Hmm.
So it kind of has, the pros and cons on that too, because I feel like I'm very much more forthcoming and ambitious, but I think in the sense that has helped me a lot with researching resources and who do I talk to, and you need to speak up because, and I always put that up even to my students now as the international navigator. So that, for people that may not know what that means, I'm essentially like the immigration advisor and academic advisor for international students. So that's the thing now. It's kind of like the roles are reversed where I'm like, you need to speak up, and I know it's hard. I know where you're coming from, but at the end of the day, you're here by yourself now, they're here without their family. You need to speak up. I know it's scary too because they're only 18, 19. That's the youngest. And now it's like, you need to figure it out because if you don't talk, no one's going to help you. So even for me, it's like, um, you need to speak up, even if it's a friend, even if it's a professor or a mentor, whoever it is, because even if they don't know how to help you resolve your issue or the situation you're in or what resources you need, everybody knows somebody.
Hmm.
And that's like my biggest thing. I always tell people, like, you have to speak up because you can tell me and vent to me about my parents or this or that, or like, I want to study abroad and I can't, or this and that. Like, okay, you don't know my background though. You don't know who I know. So I can connect you with people too. So it's just, even with your friends and all that. So it's just the essential part is you need to speak up.
I agree. I feel like all of college is like just teaching me how to communicate and how to network
Hmm.
with people. And you're right. It's like you show up to your office or you show up to someone else's and it's like, oh, well, let me lead you to the resources or to the people. It's like kind of this big goose chase, but it's helpful.
It is a big journey because even in my case with my mom coming all the way from Puerto Rico here and wanting then to go to college and be away from her, we grew up as a single mom, so she was overprotective. She was
Hmm.
everywhere that I was. She knew everything that I was doing with anyone that I was, and the fact that I was gonna be away from her um, was a difficult time for her to understand, and I needed to understand. Well, I need this. This is just part of my path. I need to go to college, and that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna be in your life anymore. I'm pretty much just there all the time. It's just that I also need to do this for myself, um, and she got the hang of it. So if you speak up and just with kindness and time, you explain to them and answer all the questions that they have, they most likely will support you.
I agree with that because the way I see it too, and this is something I've told a lot of, because I did some study abroad advising as well, is that students say, oh, like I can't because of money or my parents or this and that. And of course, I've been there, I get it, but I always tell them too, it's like your parents are saying no because they just don't understand. So at the end of the day, not to be a bad influence, because there's always my spiel with them is like, not to be a bad influence, but if you're gonna rebel, rebel for your education. Because to them, this is what rebelling looks like,
Hmm.
because you're not, putting into place what they're telling you to do. But it's more about informing them rather than just doing it, right? Because that's how I say I like inputted it a little by little to my parents, especially my dad, where I'm like, oh, well, today I spoke with a financial aid specialist because I want to study abroad, maybe this and that time, this is what they said. So it's kind of like feeding them like little spoonfuls of like information. And then it's like, okay, you're showing them that you're actually like putting the effort, you're being proactive, you're reaching deadlines, you're doing the research, and you're informing them. So my thing is, you're not asking for permission anymore because these are your life decisions now, but it's about informing them because then that way they'll feel more secure.
Yeah, like I had a single mom. Yeah, same. So like I understand. Just I'm like a half hour away, and it's still like, hey, can you come home this weekend? The kids and I are gonna go do this, and I'm like, ah, you know. So I do like you
Mhm.
love like you have to love it, but it's like yeah, there is like the good separation
Yeah, I
that
don't want
needs
to
to
see
happen.
whenever I have to have that conversation with my mom of, Mom, I want to go abroad. That's going to be a fun time for me.
Okay, so for our next question, how has Spanish as like just being a bilingual person informed your identity and impacted like your interpersonal interactions like in the US and also when you were traveling abroad?
It's funny because like before my whole like international experience, like I never thought me being bicultural or bilingual was cool, I guess for the lack of other terminology, but like it was just my norm, like growing up speaking Spanish only at home and with family, and then outside of that was only English. My academic life has been in English, give me a book in Spanish, like a textbook. I'll probably understand 75% of the terminology, and other than that, I'm like, what the heck does that word mean? Right? And I feel more comfortable speaking Spanglish more than anything with friends. Um, so even if I try to speak, even now, even at work, like if I have to speak with someone that only speaks Spanish, not a lick of English, I get anxious because I'm like, oh man, now it's like, am I saying this word right? Is my grammar correct? Does that word even exist in
Exists, yeah.
Spanish? And am I just translating it to English and it doesn't even make sense, right? So even with that, again, this was just my life. So it wasn't until like I studied abroad where it kicked in of like, oh, I am unique. Like, especially within East Asia where I've been in this again, homogenous countries, maybe a good majority have not been to the US. Um, and I say that because even with the questions I got as a foreigner in their country, like a lot of people were surprised, I don't look like the stereotype of what an American looks like. So when I would say I'm from the US, they'd be like, "Really? Oh, okay." And then they would look confused. But then, if they ever caught me speaking Spanish over the phone, or like if there was another student that was Spanish speaking as well, they would ask me right away, "Oh, how do you know Spanish? Why do you know Spanish? I thought you said you're from America."
Mm.
So then it's like, then it kind of hit me sometimes where I kind of felt like I was repeating myself like I did in the US, where I would be like, "Oh, well, touching the immigration history again, like, oh, well, my family immigrated from Mexico and I speak Spanish and English because XYZ, right?" So then at that point, my perspective ended up changing though, because initially it was kind of like, oh, great, I'm repeating myself again, and I didn't want that to happen while I was abroad. But then I had to like make a trigger in my brain of like, oh no, this is like an educational moment right now, because these people don't realize then probably that America is super diverse. It's not just English, there's many cultures, many languages, a huge immigration history,
Hmm.
and they just don't know and they're curious. So the fact that people were fascinated that I was American but a Spanish speaker and I looked the way I was, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I am cool in a way that I didn't think of myself. So it's just something that it really helped me change my perspective, especially because my hair is very curly. I've had people, there was a moment I remember clearly. I was sitting at a subway station waiting for the train, and I was on my phone looking down, and all of a sudden I had this lady come up to me and touch my hair.
Oh my
Oh.
God.
And I automatically got angry. I didn't react to her, but I mean she could see it in my face, kind of like, what are you doing? But then I had to like, calm down for a second and be like, okay, she's never seen curly hair. she's probably just curious. But there's like moments like that that I've had where I'm like, this is an educational moment right now. They just don't know. People here have very fine straight hair. They've never seen curly hair, so it's things like that where I was like, okay, this is just an educational moment. So it was very different from the US. I feel like in the US, because of how diverse it is, I've never been questioned about my identity. Not that I can think of at the moment anyway, but like I felt like it was more happening more while I was abroad.
But also, tell me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that having something like that happen in such a constant basis would become tiring of, I am not your teacher, I am not an exhibition, I'm just a regular human being who is trying to live my life, and to have to constantly explain yourself of who you are and where you come from and all that, it could get tiring.
I would say a little bit, yeah, but I think what I looked more out of it is just having fun with it.
Okay.
Especially with like the students I became friends with at Aju University, which is the school in South Korea I was in for the academic year. Because since I was around my peers more, especially in class, I took advantage of that. I was like, I'm going to show them like what bachata music is and what salsa is, and like let me take them to any events that I could find. So that was kind of like the thing that I took advantage of while I was in Korea too, is just trying to find my own Latin culture within Asia. So that was just like a thing that really made me feel more proud of my heritage, because one of the things I realized while I was gone, I mean, you get the highs and the lows being away from home, especially in a foreign country,
Mm-hmm.
culture shock. So, one of the things that really hit me, I was like, why am I always so sad? I feel like something's missing. And I realized that while I was gone, when I was living in Milwaukee at the time, I always loved to go out Latin dancing with my friends. And that was just something I constantly did. And I realized, oh, this is just something I don't have in my routine. So I actually found a Latin dance studio in Gangnam in Korea, and I was just mind blown. Like these Korean people, not even one foreigner. I was the only one that showed up that is dancing bachata and salsa, and I'm over here like, how the heck did my culture reach
Oh my god.
Asia?
Right.
And every time I've traveled now, I mean, aside from studying abroad, is like I try to find my Latin culture in that country, so I always try to find Latin dance studios, try to like go to Latino restaurants and see if like they have something that really seems authentic. So when Korea, actually in my last week, I actually found a restaurant that had authentic tacos, and I was like, this is amazing. Like I
Oh
just
my
was kind of
god.
like mind blown, like how does this reach here? So it's something that now I think that's how I take advantage of educating people, like, oh, this is authentic, this is not. This is
Mm.
fusion, this is more American, so just trying to show them like this is what my background really is within your own country.
Yeah,
It's a lot of fun.
that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, that's so cool. So what part does acculturation play, like in your past, in your present, in your future?
So before I really didn't know what that looked like before I even went abroad, because I guess in a way I didn't see it as something important or something that I really acknowledged, didn't know what that looked like. So, I think it really is important, to be able to respect the culture while you're abroad, because especially as an American and a foreigner, because many people, and again, this is just from my experience in Asia, right? Because I haven't studied abroad otherwise in other countries, but being the person that sticks out, like you have to be respectful. Like I think for me now, it feels like common sense now. Like I do my research before I go to any foreign country, like to see what's appropriate for dressing, what isn't appropriate, especially in public. Like what is the behavior? How do you behave in public transportation? What words are okay and not okay to say. Because in that way, even though you're not a part of the culture, doing those things that might look minor shows that you're giving respect and you're putting in the effort to be a part of the people. Yes, it's not your culture, you're not gonna, you know, mix well with certain perspectives and such, but at least that's gonna help people see, oh yeah, they're actually putting in the effort. And as being someone that is sticking out like a sore thumb, if you actually try to learn some of the language, whether or not, you're actually, in the college sense, making it a minor, or learning the language for fun or whatever, at least learning how to ask a question like, oh, can you help me? Or do you speak English? Or, just little questions like that in their native language is going to make them more open to actually want to talk to you. Because in my experience, it's even if you mess up, then they're not going to be afraid to speak to you in their English. Because many people, I've realized that when I was in Korea, that especially the young students, like high schoolers, if you went up to them, they'd be hesitant because they start getting self-conscious, respectfully so. Like even when I was studying Mandarin and Korean, like I was like, oh, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to mess it up, and then I'm gonna sound so dumb. But even when you're abroad and you do that, that's gonna make them feel like, oh, they messed up, so it's okay. I'm gonna feel comfortable now to talk to them in English. So just having the experience with acculturation has allowed me to be more upfront now, in the future sense and present, like helping people even when I'm in the city or if I'm even locally or somewhere else in the US. Like if I can see right away that someone is lost, I go up to them like, are you lost? I can help you. Or if I'm like out and it's some sort of customer service, and you could tell that the person providing the service is getting frustrated or angry, then I step in because you can see the distress the person has in their face, that they're not being able to communicate or convey what they need. And then, you just want to help make that a little easier for them, because at the end of the day, I've been through that too. And it just feels horrible to feel like, oh, like no one wants to help me and I'm completely lost, or now I'm scared and anxious, so that's how I put it into perspective now, especially even with students, working with international students. Yeah.
Have you had those moments yourself while studying abroad and being in another country or like Asia or wherever you studied, like, oh my goodness, I can't communicate in a way, or like how was your experience?
Yeah, for sure. I think I have a perfect story, and I think I'm gonna keep it to a minimum because I don't want people to worry when they hear this. But it happened multiple times when I was studying abroad. You get some people that are just like, oh, foreigner, no, 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 don't talk to me, and they just close their doors on you basically, and it's like, okay, well, take it with a grain of salt. But the biggest time it happened to me was actually my last week studying in Korea. I was actually in the airport and my passport got lost or stolen. To this point, I still don't know what happened to it. And that's the irony, is that I was abroad for a whole year and nothing ever happened to it. But the day I was supposed to fly back home, maybe that was a sign.
Of course, right?
Maybe I shouldn't have left. But, in that moment, it's just the moment of panic and not being able to communicate anything. Your brain just goes into a complete block. Like, what, I'm supposed to go home. How do I communicate? And, there I was very happy to see that, again, your face says everything. I was in distress. I was crying. I was freaking out. And I had multiple people like that worked in the airport, like Korean flight attendants, a lot of like even janitorial staff, like asking me, like, and then just trying to get it through me. So I think that's like the biggest impact I had, because I had no way of communicating in that moment. People were trying to dissect, like, what do you need? What's wrong? And then just trying to like speak in broken Korean, broken English, and then trying to like communicate with hand movement, like, please help me. So I think that's how it's helped me now. Like when I see a student in distress, especially because I bring that up, because I work in higher ed, even that similar situation has already happened to 2 students already, and it's only been a month and a half since school started for them. So in that moment, I just pick it up right away. I'm like, no, you have to do this, this, this. I have a copy of your passport. We're going to do it. We're going to figure it out now. Because I wish I would have had that too right away. But because of the same thing, I was trying to communicate with so many people, and it becomes overwhelming, because then you get fed so many faces and then instructions, and then, you're just in a blur. So when that happens to students now, I'm like, nope, I know what to do. You have to be the one that's calm, because they're the ones that are freaking out. Yeah. So you have to like ease the situation for them right away.
Did you ever think that you'd be here, like in this position, like as a career?
Oh, heck no. No, No
Yeah.
way.
You just seem
Yeah,
so passionate about your students and like you've been there and like to bring your experience. So I'm just kind of curious.
my other part of how I identify with my upbringing is that I was low income, first gen, um, government assistance in various forms, right? Financial aid. There's nothing bad with getting financial aid. I always want to emphasize that because I feel like a lot of students feel some sort of shame with that. Um, so because of all of these things, I never imagined myself at all studying abroad in general. Like I never thought I'd leave even the state of Illinois. So for me, moving to Wisconsin was a huge deal, and then being able to go abroad and now traveling for leisure and work. Because even so, I didn't realize before, sometimes I do meditate on a lot of this stuff, is that I didn't realize how much my family's immigration background, or like immigrant background, I mean, really affected me in a way I didn't know. Because I do come from a mixed status family. So I have, for people that may not know what that means, it's just I have different family, like some are citizens, some are undocumented and such. So I didn't see myself as being the person that would be able to leave, even though I am an American citizen. Like I just never saw that for myself. So when I did go to community college, that was a moment I always tell students, college is a fresh new start for everybody. It's a blank slate. Nobody knows you. You can start fresh. So when I went to community college, my thought was if I can't go abroad, then I have to figure it out now. So at the College of Lake County, and it still is there today, is International Club. And it was all international students. So I was like, okay, well, if I can't go abroad, they're here. So I can just join International Club and become friends with these people. And I think a lot of people really don't know, and I say a lot of people as in my friends, because I've never told them this, is that they're the reason I actually ended up wanting to study abroad. Because when I got to talk to them and get to know them and build that friendship, it was a really good way to break the stereotype of international students are in the US because they have money. So the biggest thing, and I notice this a lot, now that I hear people when they talk, is that the stereotype is still there that international students that are here to obtain their degree are rich. And once I had those conversations with my friends, it was my parents sacrificed this and that. I had to quit this and that, or I had to work. I had to figure out the funds. My family sold their home. They sold everything they had so we could have the funds for me to come to school. And it's things like that where it was just mind blowing to me, because then I thought, these people are no different from me. They like sacrificed so much just to come here. So if they can do it, then why can't I see myself doing that? So then that was just, the more I talked to them, the more it became so motivational for me to actually do it. And then it's like, then you hit the roadblock of, well, I don't really know what I don't know now. Because if I want to go abroad, who do I talk to? Like, where do I start? So I think for all students that have that kind of similar situation is get involved. Like even at UWM, there's the Center for International Education. There's the English Language Academy. Like even if you don't see yourself being able to study abroad, get involved that way at least. So even when I transferred to UWM, I didn't have a student job right away. So the way I entered the realm of international higher ed again was going to the international office during my second semester. And I was like, oh, I want to help with airport pickup. And then it's kind of like, well, how do you know about airport pickup and why? And it's like my background with that, because even at College of Lake County, after I studied abroad in Japan, I got hired as a student worker in their office. So, I already had like a little bit of knowledge about how the system worked. So, then I introduced myself that way. I got involved. So it's just, that's what I want to emphasize so much for students, is that even if you don't think study abroad is really in your reach right now, get involved with the international office. They have the exchange buddy program. So get paired up with an exchange student for the semester or the academic year and help them out around, introduce them to your friends, help them assimilate, to the environment. And There's also language exchanges, and get involved with the English Language Academy because they also want their students to practice English. So if there's events on campus that the Center for International Education is leading, especially with International Education Week, volunteer or even just join as a student because a lot of those events, the international students are the ones that are going. And what we want is for like domestic students, which we call non-visa students, is like to join and be a part of that. Because a lot of the time, what these students have a problem with is that they don't know how to connect with the American students. And that has to do a lot with, again, and this is, I learned this when I was in Korea, like it has to do a lot with culture. Socioculture is very different because when I was in Korea, I didn't realize before that you don't just go up to a person and start conversating. That's kind of like, well, you don't know me, so why are you talking to me?
Yeah.
It's the group think of, if this person is my friend and they're friends with this person, then they have to introduce me as the middle person so we can actually start that conversation. So I think that's what I didn't realize before, and that's why now it's like even as in the field I'm like in trying to introduce students to each other because then I'm the middle person, right? Everybody knows me because I'm their advisor, but they don't feel comfortable just talking to each other. So it's like, oh, like I know this student. Oh, you're looking for someone that speaks this language, and then I connect them. So it's essential to just be proactive and reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you still have friends who are from different countries? Like, do you get to visit them from your travels?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I actually just went to Europe in May. And the friends that I visited there are actually one of them is a friend that actually went to the College of Lake County. He's Honduran and works now in Sweden. So it was wonderful seeing him again. And then my friend from France and my friend from the Netherlands, I met them on my exchange program in South Korea. And then I have a lot of friends in Taiwan. Those friends I actually met while I was at UWM from my involvement in the office. So I have a lot of international friends, but those are the ones I've seen recently, within the past year. But yeah, I mean, it's my next hope is to go to Argentina, to visit another friend that's there, and hopefully Mexico too. So it's wonderful because I think a lot of people don't realize that studying abroad connects you so much with people from other countries, and like in a way, it also becomes your network. You know, people don't really see that their friends are their network as well, because at some point, you know, they're professionals in their field too.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know where that could lead as well.
So, how would you, for those who don't necessarily know, how would you describe the unique sets of challenges, responsibilities, and also like maybe positives of like being a first generation student?
I think a lot with my upbringing, and I would hope many can identify with this too, is just that my parents just didn't know how to help me. That was the biggest challenge. Um, Even, you know, growing up as a being in middle school, even like my parents didn't know the importance of like parent teacher conferences and why do I have to go to that? Or even when it came to completing, you know, very close to completing high school and needing to apply for FAFSA. And my parents were like, why do they need my tax information? For what? And, you know, and like freaking out over that. And then now it's like university level, like, why do you want to go abroad? And why do you want to go this long? You know, so it's just always needing to be proactive and being resourceful. And I think it's interesting because even with this upbringing, I think that's why I'm so good at doing research and trying to just find solutions. Um, so I think that it's like a double-edged sword, right? You know, there's a lot of stress that comes with it, a lot of self-doubt. Even now in the professional field, I do get hit with imposter syndrome sometimes too. And then just trying to navigate it along the way because, you know, I feel like even though there's pros and cons, there is privileges that I have that I didn't realize I had until I went abroad. You know, just simply having a U.S. passport was a big deal. You know, I didn't realize how much that really was a privilege for me. And then being able to actually obtain a degree and just having these resources to help me with funding as well. Um, but it's just all of this has also helped me with like my professional developments. You know, people don't realize that even though this is more family related, it really did build skills that I didn't think I had, because a lot of people get really surprised with how quick I am to figure things out and find solutions and information, and oh, who do you talk to, and this and that really helped me become marketable, I think. And then also I believe that with my upbringing and being first gen, it's also helped me be really humble and not forget about my roots, not forget where my family came from and the sacrifices they made. Um, because a lot of that had really pushed me in a way that I didn't know, so it was unconsciously motivating me to do better, just so I didn't fall into those patterns that my family has had for so long. Um, so I think just being first gen is a blessing. It can be stressful. I don't want to say it's a blessing and a curse, because it's not a curse, but I think it's helped me realize how capable I really am, and tying that with studying abroad, I think that's what's pushed me more to feel more confident in myself, because I had to figure it out and I left. And then I realized no one can actually stop me other than myself. People can tell me no. People can tell me, or like, why would you do that? Or they can make you feel guilty for not considering your family. But at the end of the day, it's my decision. And this is my career. This is my trajectory. Like, so why should I feel guilty for wanting this for myself? And it's not to belittle any other people's experiences, but it's like, just because you couldn't doesn't mean I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
or shouldn't, right? So I think it's just, at the end of the day, it's be proud of being first gen, or if you're not first gen and you want to do something that people think might be crazy, then go be crazy. Like, figure it out. Like, it's not going to do anything bad. Like I said before, rebel for yourself, for your decisions, your education, because if that's what it is, then so be it.
Yes. Also, with all this, it begs the question: what started that interest for other cultures and learning languages?
I think it was natural, and I love that you asked this question, because I actually discussed this with my supervisor the other day, that I think unconsciously my parents did, because comparing my parents, I guess, lifestyle per se compared to my other friends that are also first gen Hispanic, is that my parents, at least, I feel like, are more open than I thought they were, because growing up, my parents have always been curious about other cultural foods. And I remember, growing up, on Saturdays, we had like this Bollywood channel that would randomly play like Bollywood music on Saturdays. And my dad would just blast the music because he loved looking at saris and all the clothing and the jewelry and the music. And, my mom liked playing just any random music she would find on the internet. And now it's like, huh, interesting. Like, I didn't realize that. And that's why I'm so open with my playlist as well. Like, people get so surprised with how diverse and multilingual my music is on Spotify. And at least, like, I think that's why I'm so open to with food when it comes to traveling, because I'm not the type to say, oh, I'm not going to try that. It's more of like, let me try it, and if I like it, tell me what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me what it is before I try it. But yeah, I mean, even so, I think it's interesting that a lot of my friends, even when I was in Taiwan recently, my friend was really shocked that I was eating chopped up pig ears. And he's like, "You actually like that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like, in Mexican culture, we have this too. It's like mixed in carnitas. Like, we eat that
Mm-hmm.
with tacos." And he was like, "What? You guys eat that too?" So I think it's interesting where my experiences too, I didn't realize how many commonalities there were with food as well. I mean, obviously it's made differently, but it's the same base.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my parents really unknowingly, like, made me very interested in cultures, even though we didn't have that international dynamic of being able to travel as a family, but the culture was definitely there.
Love that.
What are you listening to right now?
Oh, I really like Rema right now. One of my Nigerian students was really shocked that I knew who that was. So. Yeah.
And I have a professor who cannot stop talking about them all the time. And like, he loves Afrobeats, and it's
Yes,
constantly talking about it all the time.
it's so good. It makes
Yes.
you actually want to move.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think it's almost impossible not to move to that.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Panther Planet Podcast, where conversation, culture, and curiosity meet. Stay connected with episode updates, commentary, and more on our socials. You can follow us at UWM_Panther Planet Podcast. Be sure to listen next time.